Hi, I'm Caitlin Kalinowski. I'm here from Oculus and Facebook. I just want to let you guys know I love lesbians, so I just could not be more happy to be here with you today. And technology. So we're going to get started. All right, so when I joined Oculus after the acquisition, my team was sweating on this huge challenge. How do you make controllers for virtual reality? Now, I don't know if you guys have used Xbox or PlayStation controllers, but you can just look down and see them. But in VR, you can't see the controllers because you've got this headset on your head. In addition, somehow, we've got to figure out how to track controllers in your 3D space. So we have this external sensor that's got to be able to see those controllers and how they move. Your fingers, when you move, anything you do, you can't get in the way of tracking these controllers. So what we did is go through all these different iterations. Every time we changed one thing, we affected something else. We had to think about the weight, we had to think about the balance, we had to think about input. And we iterated and iterated and iterated on these controllers. And that's where the magic was. In all those iterations, we were able to find a way to have a comfortable controller that fits in your hand. And not just your hand, but as many hands as possible. We wanted these controllers to fit the 5th percentile female all the way to the 95th percentile male. We've got these really interesting foam models in the office of heads. And the 5th percentile female head is about this big, and the 95th percentile male head is about this big. It's a huge difference, and it's a really tough challenge. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these rules today on how you can take any product through a product development cycle. And who works on making products, hardware, software, anything like that? Okay, about half of you. Who works on selling those products? Okay, so hopefully we do a good job for y'all. So the touch controller for the Oculus Rift VR is my latest product, my team's latest product. But my first product was the OQO Model 2. Does anybody remember this product? There's a reason that only this person in the whole audience remembers. And thank you. Usually there's nobody. This was a crazy little product. This was 2004, I think. So we started developing this pre-smartphone, and it was a fully functional PC and this tiny little product. It had a full keyboard. It weighed less than a pound. Had a Wacom. It was really, really crazy. But there were some perfectionists in the leadership, and nothing was kind of quite right, so we kept iterating and iterating and iterating. And actually, the enclosure that you see here, this part, we went through over 99 iterations, so we had to pull a new part number on this part. It's crazy. And in the process of iterating, we lost a bunch of time. And in losing a bunch of time, we ended up shipping the product in April of 2007. And does anybody remember what came out in the beginning of 2007? That's right. It was the iPhone, which is just a complete, it was the killer of the category. And if we'd been able to define our negotiables better, we would have actually been able to come out and really have a shot at the product. And so this product came out right when the iPhone came out. It had a battery life that lasted an hour. Right. So go back, define your non-negotiables. And I want to take us all back to a time before your product has really gotten started, in the very beginning. And that's when your investors aren't clamoring for progress updates, and your customers aren't asking when you're going to ship, and you've got some time, a little bit of time. That's when you need to define your non-negotiables. And so you got to decide the top 2 or 3 things the product absolutely must do, or you're not going to ship. And you can have nice to haves after that, but there's got to be a very simple thing. And the whole team needs to be aligned on what those things are. Another product, the iPad. So Steve Jobs had the idea for the iPad in very early 2000s. And so actually a team that I worked with when I was at Apple started working on it way back then. And Steve was always really clear on his non-negotiables. And for this product, his non-negotiable was it had to be lightweight enough that I could read for a couple hours without my arms getting tired. That was it. And so over many, many, many years, Apple engineers would bring a prototype to Steve, and he would probably throw them across the room. I'm not sure, I wasn't there. But it was never right. And it took 7 years of work on the iPad before the iPad was shipped. And halfway through that product cycle, they discovered the product idea for the iPhone and went on and shipped the iPhone. And the iPad still wasn't right. And that's how dedicated he was to this principle. So the second big principle that I want to talk about is let the product drive your style. And I'm going to blow through this one because it's actually pretty simple. Caution on one side, speed on the other. You have to choose where you're going to be on this slider. And it can change depending on where you are in your product roadmap or where you are in your product cycle. But you really do need to check and take a minute in the beginning and say, okay, are we going to go for speed? Are we going to go for caution? If we're kind of going for caution, I'm going to ask engineers to check and recheck their assumptions, verify, move slower. On the speed side, I'm basically going to say, okay, write down all the things you're concerned about on a piece of paper, and then I'm going to rip it off under the top 3 and say, just focus on those things. Next one, solve the hardest problems first. This is actually the toughest to actually execute. I think we probably all know this one. And I'll put a link where this talk is, because I'm going to have to blow through it a little faster than I usually do. So you can go find it if you want a little bit more information. But basically the idea here is that most people do the red line. Most people kind of work on stuff, and then once we get close to shipping, we all rush to solve the problems that are left. But the smart way to do it is the green line, where you actually take the hardest problem you have to solve first. This thing that you don't even know if you can solve. And work on that like crazy. Put all your hours in the very beginning, put your best people on it, and do as much work there as you can. So that's the next big one. This one's a huge one. Build ugly prototypes. I have some good pictures of ugly prototypes here. Why ugly prototypes? If you're working on the fine details before you're ready to sell something, you're wasting your time and your team's time. Solve the hardest problems first. In this case, it was just, what shape should it be? We don't need the most beautiful prototypes to figure that out. This is putty, and like foam core. That's okay. The other great thing about building ugly prototypes is that your executives or other decision makers like to lock on things that are pretty. We all do. So don't put polish on your prototypes until you actually want to sell them to an executive. We have this funny thing that happens in my industry where every once in a while somebody will throw out a price that they think this product should be sold for on a slide way too early. And many times some of the execs will be talking about that price for the next 12 months because they get so locked on it. And it's really dangerous. So prototyping, this part of prototyping that I'm going to show you in these slides, the first thing we're trying to figure out is, what is the shape of this thing? How are you going to hold it? How are you going to use it? And then over time, when we figured that out with these prototypes, we also over here had a totally different line of prototypes where the electrical engineers were building little boards and actuators and buttons. And then only when we got closer did we actually combine those two prototypes. So we kind of started to braid in the hardest thing, which was really the ergonomics, with the easier things, which was the application of where does the board inside the printed circuit board go? Where do the batteries go? That sort of thing. We start to iterate and get closer and closer to a product. Now this outside ring, the way that this works, this outside ring is IR transparent plastic. And inside the ring there are infrared LEDs that are kind of always firing. You can't see them because we can't see IR light. And so the sensor on the outside actually can read the way that those LEDs are firing and know where in space your controller is. And the nice thing about this is you can actually open your hand with this controller. There's a button that knows when your hand's open and closed. There are capacitive touch sensors on the trigger, so we know when you're pointing, giving a thumbs up. It's a pretty interesting design, and I definitely come talk to me if you want to learn more about it. And this is the final product. The fifth big rule is converge quickly or reset. So basically on the x-axis here are the number of attempts, and on the y-axis is how close are you getting This is a way to avoid getting stuck in the wrong direction. So if you wait too long to go in the wrong direction, you can really lose time. And my article has a story about the Mac Pro on this as well. So yeah, definitely if you start to find yourself plateauing, go back and check your assumptions. And so the final point I want to make is iterate like crazy. Anything that you are building that interfaces with the customer has to be really, really, really good. You want to give yourself a ton of iterations there. The MacBook Pro, the glass trackpad, took 50 iterations of chemical etch on the glass to get the feeling right. Has anybody ever gone from a MacBook trackpad to a different computer trackpad? You know the difference? That texture is really, really important. So definitely make sure you have time to iterate like crazy. So if you want more information about what I'm talking about today, there's a first round review article, Superior Product Prototyping, and you can go check it out for more details. Thanks.